Florence Small, the woman who had it all until her husband, John Franks, took it all away. Florence had a family, friends, and was part of the community until it was all gone. John Franks, a man who strangled her, shot her, and then finally burned down the house and her body to cover all of the evidence. Florence fell for his charms, and through that, he used and abused her, and she paid the price for it. Now, we as the prosecution have the burden of proof in today's case. This means that we must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that John Franks is guilty of the murder of Florence Small, the arson done to cover up the evidence, insurance fraud, and finally, the possession of explosives. After hearing today's testimony and examining the presiding evidence, you will see the defendant isn't as smart as he thinks he is. He is the one who will lose it all. In order to prove this, we will call some key witnesses. First is Mavis Wilbur, a forensic pathologist. Now, Mavis did the autopsy on Florence Small and will be able to tell you all of the trauma that occurred on the body. She will walk you through step by step and tell you that the cause of death was asphyxiation by fatal strangulation that was caused by a rope. Next is Alexis Elmers, the neighbor of Florence Small. Alexis was Florence's beloved friend, and she will testify to always hanging out and eating lunch with her. Alexis will show and talk about how John Franks and how bad of a husband and man he was to Florence, as she had witnessed some abusive behavior. She will also talk about the lunch Florence had that same day of her death and how that starts the timeline for everything. Next, we will call Elizabeth Payton, Florence's sister, to the stand. Elizabeth will also state to how she had witnessed many instances of abuse and anger from John Franks towards Florence Small. Next, we will call the cab driver and friend of John Franks. The cab driver will testify to have always been invited in for a drink, but on that night of September 17th, 2021, John Franks never let him in. He will also talk about how seeing the rope burns when going to pick up John that day, and how that once he saw the body, he noticed the rope on her neck, and that it was the same rope John kept in the boathouse. Then we will call the arson expert, the police chief, and they will give us insider information to what had happened on the night of September 17th, and how John Franks was intending to commit insurance fraud by burning down the house. On September 17th, 2021, John Franks had taken the life of his wife, Florence Small. He had burned down the property and her body with it to try and cover up the evidence. He had signed release insurance forms and collected the insurance money off of the property and his late wife. Lastly, he had used an incendiary device, a ticking time bomb, to set off the fire that caused the mess. Through these witnesses, we will prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is as guilty as charged. At the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Josh Tremblay, will come before you and ask you to find the defendant, John Franks, guilty of murder and arson. Thank you.